everyone, and happy Victober to you. I'm going to be doing today the Victorian Literature Journey tag. This was sort of tweaked and created by Roz from Scallydandling About the Books and Tilly from Tilly's Bookshelf. They tweaked the Shakespeare Journey tag, which was created by Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading. And so I will link the original Shakespeare Journey tag, and then I will link Roz and Tilly's videos down below. It's such a cool concept for a tag, and last year when it came out, I realized I had a video lined up for every single day of Victober, and I didn't have room for it, and I didn't want to do it after Victober, so I saved it for this Victober. So I'm here to answer these questions, and the first one is, what was your first experience reading Victorian literature, and how was it? So it's a bit of a long-winded answer. So I will say my first experience was when I was 9 or 10, and I was first starting to really get into chapter books. And I would pass by every day in our living room on the bookshelf. My dad had this beautiful cloth-bound edition of Great Expectations. It was this forest green with black and gold label on it, and it was so beautiful. Barnes & Noble used to have this cloth-bound line that was forest green. And so I finally just grabbed it off the shelf, and I read the opening where Pip is in the marshes and he meets the convict who threatens his life if he doesn't bring him food. What a powerful and captivating opening, and I was absolutely fascinated. And then I didn't continue. I think maybe I felt intimidated by such a chunky book, which it would have been quite remarkable to be 9 or 10 and complete Great Expectations. So then my next experience was after I watched the brilliant 2005 Jane Eyre with Ruth Wilson. I just absolutely loved the story, was so captivated by it. And I wanted to know more. So I thought, I'm going to listen to an audiobook of Jane Eyre. And I ended up, this is when I had an iPod, and I bought what I thought was an audiobook. And then later on, I realized, oh, it was actually kind of an audio dramatization, and it was very much abridged. But by the time I finished, I thought, oh, well, I got enough of the story. I was content with that. So it wasn't until years later when I read the book and I was completely blown away by it. But then my first full book that I read was when I had just graduated high school and I had started community college, and I had quite a commute to my different classes and to the couple jobs I was working. And I listened to Oliver Twist on audio, and that was my first Victorian novel. And I was just completely blown away by the very patient way you're going through this lengthy story, and all of the different plot lines that Dickens balances. And this is one that's kind of lower ranking for fans of Victorian literature or fans of Dickens, but I just loved it. So I've been scared to reread it ever since because I'm worried I won't love it as much. So yes, it was Oliver Twist. That was my first novel. Question 2 says, has the reading of a Victorian book ever brought you to tears? If so, tell us more. I am a very easy crier, so yes, it definitely has. So first, I think all of Gaskell's novels have made me cry at one point or another. There's usually a sad death in one of her novels, or just something that, no, it's usually the deaths that are the sad part. I guess North and South just has very moving portrayals of this terrible, terrible poverty that people were living in. So yes, I think all of Gaskell's and all of George Eliot's. There is a conversation between two characters in Adam Bede that's in a very pivotal moment. That moved me to tears seeing that. Also, in the book Romola, there's 2 parts. One, if you have read Romola, I will just say library. That I was just done for. And then also there's a part in Romola when a character is really completely in despair. And it's so moving how she writes it. They think there is no hope left for them. No purpose left. In A Welsh Witch, there's a scene when several characters are in mortal peril, and the way it's written is so powerful. And it's just such a vivid scene in my memory. Then there are 2 books that I was inconsolable and just like sobbed like a baby could not, kind of the, the deep breaths and everything. And those were The Heir of Redcliffe and The Cloister and the Hearth. Now, interestingly, I can't remember if I cried the first time I read The Heir of Redcliffe. I think I was so kind of shocked by what had happened. But then when I reread it, I knew it was coming. And for some reason, that made it more emotional. And I just sobbed and sobbed. So I'll be curious if that happens. I'm planning on rereading it later on this year, and we'll see how I do. The Cloister and the Hearth is inspired by a few real events. And so I had kind of looked up the background of it, and so I knew what was coming. And still, I just was hit so hard. And actually, I'm someone that I really like having music on while I read. Some people I know find it distracting. It actually helps me focus. It's like I can zone in. And I was I had become really fixated on this one song that was on a Korean drama. So it's a Korean song. And if it's songs with words, I get too distracted while I'm reading. But since it was Korean words, I didn't find it distracting. So here I was inconsolably crying, and now whenever I hear this Korean song, it makes me think of The Cloister and the Hearth, which is this historical novel that is set in 16th century Netherlands and then also Italy. And it's just this whole collision of cultures. But yes, I found that book so moving. And then in The Belton Estate by Anthony Trollope, there is this letter that is written with so much grace and generosity, and I just found it so tender and romantic, and I loved it. So I found that very, very moving. Question 3, are there any people who have played a significant role in your Victorian literature journey? So in my personal life, there are not really any people that I know that are as enthusiastic about Victorian literature as I am. So I would say that it's mostly become a booktube thing. So first of all, Katie from Books and Things. I am just forever grateful to Katie for creating Victober. I was already enthusiastic about Victorian literature. I had many authors I wanted to try more of. I don't know about many actually, but I had a number of Victorian novels I was excited to get to. And then Victober happened, and it was like a switch was flipped, and it's never been the same. I've never looked back. There is just nothing that scratches that itch like Victorian literature for me, and just has leaves such a lasting impression on me. There are a few exceptions, a few Victorian novels that I read and can't really remember much. Most of them leave a very lasting impression. Then also my friend Elizabeth Brink, last year, I don't know if you were watching, but I had a goal of reading 25 Victorian novels. And Elizabeth, I think maybe she was trying to get to 27 Victorian novels. And so we were cheering each other on and updating each other whenever we finished one. And it was so fun to have that camaraderie throughout the year. And yeah, just have just these lovely conversations, our honest thoughts on the books that we had read without giving spoilers if it was one that the other hadn't read. And so, yes, Elizabeth was such a fun part of my Victorian reading last year. And then I have to say, all of you in the BookTube community, it is so fun to discuss with you these Victorian novels that many readers are not interested in giving the time of day, and how you see the merits in them, even when there's parts of them we might not love, and we don't love every Victorian author. It's just such a delight to discuss it with all of you. Then question 4, do you have a favorite film or TV adaptation of a Victorian book? What about one you'd like to see made? So one I'd like to see made is definitely any Charlotte Mary Yonge. I think that her books on screen would be so lovely, and one of those ones that, it's been a really terrible day, I want to put on a Charlotte Mary Yonge period drama. Like, it would just be so lovely. And I think anyone who's enjoyed the Gaskell on screen, and even though she's not Victorian, but the Jane Austen on screen, it would just be such a treat to have more like that. So I don't know if that will ever happen. I know she has fallen out of fashion even amongst Victorian literature lovers, and I just really hope that changes. And at some point, a screen adaptation happens. Then Wives and Daughters. It's my favorite Victorian novel, and I think possibly my favorite Victorian miniseries. But following closely, I have realized I love Dickens adapted on screen. And I have to say, sadly, I think I might enjoy him more on screen than I do the reading of, with the exception of David Copperfield. Um, he just works so well on screen. I think because his books are very plot driven, and so that really helps. And so his characters, the way they're written as types and less like characters in the books, I always have more trouble connecting with Dickens characters than I do with other authors. Um, and I know, he's telling a different kind of story. So it has to be treated differently. But for me, I am such a character reader. So the ones that stick out to me are the Daniel Radcliffe, David Copperfield. I've watched that one countless times. The boys have watched it with me and they love it. Nicholas Nickleby, this is the James Darcy Nicholas Nickleby. I think it's Acorn Media. I love that miniseries. It might be time for me to watch it again. The 2005 Bleak House. I just completed my rewatch of that, and it's such an astoundingly good series, and it's so good at showing kind of the like grime of city life, and oh, what a powerful series. Little Dorrit, the one that was made with Claire Foy. I love that one. That's another one the boys have watched with me, so they really enjoy watching Dickens movies. And then there's a 1995 Oliver Twist adaptation. Now this one does take some major liberties with adding a couple extra characters. But other than that, I would say it's such a good Oliver Twist adaptation. There is a more modern one that has, oh, this is going to bug me. I can't remember his name, as Bill Sykes. Well, I'll just put the picture here. That one's really good. It's very fast paced and kind of breakneck speed, but I really liked it as a very different take. And then also, there's a newer adaptation of The Moonstone that was done, and that is such a wonderful, kind of very atmospheric, autumnal, winter time kind of watching to do. Then Vanity Fair, Amazon Prime did a Vanity Fair adaptation a few years back, and I finally watched it. I think it was last year, and it's excellent. It's so good. I actually didn't love the book of Vanity Fair, but this miniseries, I think it was maybe the writing style, this miniseries really worked for me. And then, controversial opinion, both Jane Eyres. I think there are many Jane Eyre fans that are very adamant, no, the Ruth Wilson one. But I like both of them. And I think that if you've only watched the feature-length movie with Mia Wasikowska and Michael Fassbender, if you've only watched it once, it's very overwhelming how fast it is in comparison, and just the different choices that they make. The acting style is different. But then now, it's the more that I watch it, the more I get kind of the beauty that is in it. And the choices, even though they're really different, I see how they really work for a feature-length one. Now, the Ruth Wilson one is just lovely for when I want to experience all of the plot of Jane Eyre. Except for they do the fortune teller differently, but nobody wants to do the fortune teller how it's done in the book because it's so cringeworthy. But if I want the emotional force that is there in the novel of Jane Eyre, I have to say I think it's more the 2011 version. But they are both wonderful. Which character in Victorian literature most resembles you or you identify with most? I have to say, I get like imposter syndrome whenever I try to think of this. I feel like I could never live up to these characters that I love. I mean, I guess I feel maybe Molly Gibson, but I'm like, am I just saying that because it's my favorite novel? But maybe I really connect with that novel because I feel this kinship to Molly. Like, I love seeing her being frustrated by annoying people. And I feel like that's such a human thing, to be frustrated by people's idiosyncrasies that get on your nerves. And kind of seeing her sometimes, despite herself, she says things that she is a little bit more snarky than she meant to be. So maybe Molly Gibson, but I feel like, I don't know, she's a lot more even-keeled most of the time than I am. So I don't really have a good answer to this. And I mean, I guess with my chronic illness, I feel like one of the more ill characters in, one of Gaskell's, or what is her name in Deerbrook? there's a disabled character. So maybe one of the ill characters. Some days I feel like, on my really bad chronic illness days, I feel like a delicate Victorian lady. Question 6. Do you have a favorite moment, scene, or line from Victorian literature? So I did not get my act together to think of lines. Although actually, you know what? As soon as I say that, I do love the line from Middlemarch. What do we live for if not to make life more easy for each other? I'm paraphrasing it. Nugget. So I wanted to look up the quote so I wouldn't get it wrong because it's so beautiful. It's from Middlemarch. What do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other? Um, Blessed is the man who, having given nothing to say, abstains from giving us wordy evidence of the. Okay, I wanted to look up this quote from Middlemarch so I don't get it wrong because I just think the wording is perfect. It's what do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other? Oh, I think that's if everybody had that philosophy, if we wanted to make life better for everyone around us, and that's how we were going about our days, life would go better. And then the other quote from Jane Eyre that I find so inspirational, but inspirational has a cheesy connotation. Oh, so fortifying is we were born to strive and endure. And it wasn't one that I noticed until like the fourth time that I read Jane Eyre. And I thought, how did I miss that line? We were born to strive and endure. I loved that. Okay, then as far as scenes go, I have a few scenes. One is there's a scene in the rain in Middlemarch. I think it's possibly the most romantic scene I will ever read. That to me, oh, it's so swoon worthy, as they say. Then there is a part in Deerbrook when things are just going very terribly for this one family. And they decide they're just going to do the next thing. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but I love it. It's when you are just so overwhelmed, you have things are not going well, and just choosing to do the next thing. And it's really helpful to me on terrible chronic illness days. It's like, okay, all right, I'm going to get myself a glass of water. I'm going to make myself warm up a bowl of this soup. Just basic things, right? I'm going to brush my teeth now. Do the next thing. It's so helpful and so useful. So that part to me, this chapter, it's a whole chapter in Deerbrook. They're just doing the next thing. And the way that they really bond over going through this trial together, it's so beautiful. Then in Adam Bede, this moment where there's a conversation between Dinah and Hetty, and it just is so moving, and the generosity and love that is shown in it, I find so moving. And then a really fun, whimsical scene is in David Copperfield when he goes with Peggotty to visit her family that live on this landlocked ship. And so he's grown up in a very, he's an only child. And so it's just he and his mother and Peggotty. And there's lots of love, but there's not really this kind of lively atmosphere to it so much as when he goes to visit Peggotty's family. And it's a bigger household, and they live on a ship, and he's just utterly enchanted by it. I love that. And then I try to think of a scene from Wives and Daughters, and it's just the whole thing blends together for me. It's hard for me to think of distinct scenes. So I'm sure there's probably a favorite scene from that, but nothing was coming to mind. Then question 7 is, does any Victorian literature intimidate you? If so, what and why? Absolutely. A lot of the nonfiction. I started The Life of Charlotte Bronte a year ago, and it has defeated me, I think, 3 times now. I am completely uninterested in ever picking it up again. It's written in such a way that I just don't care. I don't care. I'm not interested. So we'll see if I ever come back to it at some point. And yeah, we're going to see. And then also think like John Ruskin's philosophical writings, and Andrew Lang has some philosophy, and William Morris. Very intimidated by all of those. Oh, George MacDonald's adult fantasy. So Lilith, I think, is one of them, and I'm just so very intimidated because his children's fairy tales I found very confusing and daunting. So I don't know. We'll see about that. Question 8. What tips would you give to someone early on in their Victorian literature journey? So 3 tips. 1, take your time. There is no timetable of how quickly you need to finish something. Especially, you could even look at the pacing with serialized novels at how slowly people would go through it. There's no rush. Take as long as you need. 2, try to find a book that is in the genre of literature that is your favorite. So if you like thrillers, find a sensation novel. If you like comedy, try some of the comedic plays, or 3 Men in a Boat, Diary of a Nobody. Also, if you like middle grade, The Story of the Treasure Seekers and the Would-Be Goods by E. Nesbit is so excellent. And also, if you like memoirs, read some of the letters by someone. And let's see, what was my final tip? Oh, also audio can be very helpful. So yes, just listening on audiobook can make it really approachable, because I do think reading Victorian literature, it's a bit like reading a different dialect. So yes, hopefully that is helpful. Then what is your top recommended read for other readers of Victorian literature? So this is someone who's not new to it. Here's my list. 1, Wives and Daughters. Everyone who loves Victorian literature should read Wives and Daughters. And plenty of people have read North and South, but have not tried Wives and Daughters. So that is, I just, hands down, it is my favorite. Also, The Heir of Redcliffe. I think Charlotte Mary Young uniquely is able to show kind of warmth and liveliness. There's just this real wonderful energy to her scenes where there are lots of characters. Or Dynevor Terrace. Dynevor Terrace feels, I'd say, a bit more approachable. There's less characters to keep track of in that one. The Cloister and the Hearth. This is not a starter Victorian novel, but if you're feeling ambitious, take your time with this. I think maybe I took 4 or 5 months to read it, and I have no regrets for taking that amount of time, because I would have just DNF'd it if I had to read it more quickly. And it ended up that then I have such a vivid reading memory of it, and I think of it so fondly. In the Roar of the Sea by Sabine Baring-Gould, if you want something that has an otherworldly feel to it, like Wuthering Heights, like Sylvia's Lovers, like The Return of the Native, pick up In the Roar of the Sea. It has the most dastardly villain in it. It's such an engaging read. Then Idylls of the King by Tennyson. The Victorians loved Arthurian legend, and this is a beautiful, beautiful set of poems that are all involving Arthurian characters. Just so beautiful. And then Middlemarch. I think there are people who argue that it's the best written English novel. I don't know if I think that, but I do know that I find it just such a beautiful, beautiful book, and one that I love thinking about it. I love thinking about that novel and all those characters. Yes. Okay, and then the last question is to tag people. And most of the people who I would have tagged did this last year, but a newer channel she does enjoy some Victorian literature. So that is Jen from Jen's Reading Life. And Jen, I don't know if you're interested in doing this tag, but I would love to see your answers if you were interested. And if you want to do this tag and you didn't do it last year, consider yourself tagged. So yes, thank you, Roz and Tilly, for tweaking the Shakespeare tag into this wonderful Victober tag. And thank you everyone for watching. I hope you're having a splendid Victober, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye.